So we talk about the 76ers a lot, I feel like, and here we go again. But this time is because, well, it's really the main talker of the NBA right now. The Philadelphia 76ers and Ben Simmons drama is continuing. He is now saying he's not going to show up for camp. He doesn't want to be a part of the team. You take it back to, you know, the struggles that Ben Simmons had with shooting and the not shooting that he was doing. And then you add on recently Doc Rivers making some comments, pretty much comparing his unwillingness to cooperate or listen to them to Trump supporters in some ways. He said this on MSNBC. And it's just like, yo, Doc, man, like at this point, it looks like you're not going to be able to trade him before the season starts. So saying this does not help the situation if you are trying to convince him to get back into the building.
No, it doesn't help at all. And like, here's the thing: I don't think it matters because I think it's already broken. But what is Doc Rivers? Can we get rid of Doc Rivers with Ben Simmons? Like, can they both just leave town and be gone forever? And I'm so tired of Doc Rivers already. Like, it took 1 year for me to be over Doc Rivers. I'm so ready for him to take a hike. I'd rather have a completely different coach and just start fresh and rip the Band-Aid off at this point. Here's the thing with the Ben Simmons news, though. I don't think it really changes anything. Like, well, I don't think Woj coming out this week and saying that Ben says he'll never play for the franchise, like, we already kind of knew that. And like, Daryl Morey's not going to trade him, and Ben Simmons has 4 years left on his contract. So we're just going to play this game of chicken, essentially. And is Ben Simmons going to sit out 4 years? That seems really illogical, and like, it's not going to happen. I think Ben might test it where, we're going to see what he can do. It reminds me of the situation in the NFL with Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers, where he just said, you know what, I'm sitting out an entire year until I get my contract. I don't care if I don't get paid. Now, is Ben going to test that? Will Ben do that? Or will the Sixers blink it and know with Joel Embiid's, prime happening right now with trying to maximize the ceiling of this team at all costs, do they end up taking a deal? I think it's somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't think Ben is going to go to training camp. I think maybe there's a situation where he's played his last games for the franchise. I also could see the scenarios as well where Ben is forced back into the building and it's super awkward, but he has to play for the team a little bit to almost up his value and get that ready for, the way Harden did in Houston, for the trade destination. But I don't know. It's hard for me to see him suiting back up in Philadelphia just because, Philly fans, like, they're going to boo the hell out of him.
Yeah, he's gonna get booed, and
it's gonna be electric whenever Ben Simmons comes back. I want to fly home almost for whenever Ben Simmons comes back, because I gotta be honest, I'm gonna boo him too. Like, if I put my Homer hat on, Ben Simmons should be booed. I'm sick of it. Philly fans just asked for Ben Simmons to just remotely develop a little bit on offense, and he couldn't. And they were supportive the whole time until he lost Game 7 last year, and it's just like, it's unacceptable.
Well, okay, so before we get too far past it, with the James Harden stuff and kind of, did he really increase his value, though? Or did he play kind of horribly and show that you got to trade me because I'm not going to give it my all here?
So I think James Harden is in a different situation because James Harden, what he is. Like, Ben Simmons has failed pretty spectacularly at the highest level. James Harden is at minimum a top 10 player in the NBA, a whole lot closer to top 5. Like, I don't think you're worried about spooking teams off when it comes to James Harden. Sure. I think with Ben Simmons, more teams than let on are going to want to trade for Ben Simmons too, as they should. It just gets into situations where what's the overall value and who could actually, put a fair package out there to get a deal done. I still think a deal gets done here eventually. Like, I think, and it's more because of Embiid than anything else. Like, they have to maximize Embiid's window. And I still think there are teams out there who will bite eventually. Like, somebody will give in on the Simmons or Morey front. And I think there are a couple teams out there who could get a fair deal done for everybody.
And so there was a few comments I've seen about it. Also, just before we get past it again, is, if Ben Simmons is a mental thing of him not able to shoot the ball, then I would imagine an entire stadium of what are supposed to be your fans booing you won't go over very well mentally. But look, if he says he's out, and we got to figure out a way around it. And there have been some, teams that have commented. I know the Timberwolves being one that have seemed interested and have been in continued talks with the Sixers. You know, there's been a lot of reports about that. I saw Stephen A's, I guess it was his A-list or whatever ESPN segment he does, where he said is something along the lines of, if you want to win not one, not two, but three championships in a row, you trade Kyrie Irving for Ben Simmons. And I think I kind of get what he was trying to get at, but no, that doesn't. I don't think
in fantasy land, I get what he's trying to get at, because I think the Nets are so good that it doesn't matter. But trading Kyrie Irving when he and Kevin Durant are the whole reason that all this is started in Brooklyn, and when you're an injury away from likely winning the title last year and are the clear title favorites this year, no, I don't think you drastically just change the whole roster and outlook of that, despite how many headaches you may think Kyrie Irving gave you. That was a weird storyline. I kind of saw that floating around all week. That was weird. That never really made sense to me.
My buddy reached out to me with it. And he's like, what do you think about this? And I was like, if you look at it from like the very, and I mean very minimal basketball stat of Ben Simmons will provide you defense and no shooting. And on that team, you already have a ton of shooting. So maybe is like the argument. But then
it makes sense. I get it on paper.
Yeah, but I'm sure if you go any deeper than just that basic line, there are 25 reasons why you shouldn't, you know?
I mean, yeah, I guess. But more or less just a chemistry thing. I don't think there's any reason to break up the chemistry there. Back to Ben Simmons, it's weird for me that he would leak to, because to me, Ben Simmons so clearly wants to be out. Like, that's the one consistent in all this. I don't know why Ben Simmons would leak that he's not going to play for the team anymore, because that feels counterproductive to him getting out. Like, you're trying to force the Sixers' hand when it's like, it's clear that Daryl Morey is also, like, Daryl Morey is not going to be the type of GM that you can just fleece. Like, it's not a situation where they're going to panic and that's going to force them to sell because you're playing hardball. Like, no, the Sixers are more than likely going to play hardball back. Yeah. So to me, that torpedoes any remaining value you have. And so that part of it is weird. Like, everyone on earth knows Ben Simmons wants to be out. Sometimes you just don't need to say it. Like, you can just do everything behind the scenes, you know?
Well, you know, and here's my conspiracy theory hat coming back on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, birds aren't real. They're drones. But
that's a fact.
Yeah, right. But I'm convinced other teams are also leaking this kind of stuff to lower Ben Simmons' value even more than it's already lowered, you know?
I think other teams that might be involved in a deal may be.
That's what
I don't think random teams in the NBA are leaking, but I mean, of course I do. I think the Kings were definitely leaking a little bit. Like, I think the Warriors have leaked. I mean, hell, what's his name? Joe Lacob just got fired for it. For trying to tamper with the Warriors in the Ben Simmons situation. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a game of leaks. That's how the NBA works. So, I guess in terms of both the objectivity hat and the homer hat, what teams do you see at this point, or do you think are most likely to actually pull the trigger that you would do in this type of deal?
The one that obviously everyone from a Sixers front wants, which is probably more the fan side of everything, is the Dame situation that's been rumored. But, you know, everything we've been seeing from Dame is
Dame's not happening. Like, we might as well, it's unrealistic.
And so, obviously, there's been a lot of Cavs, 76ers talk. And so, again, my buddy who's big involved in this trade in terms of just he wants to see where it goes, he was asking me, and I assume it's because he was looking at random rumors, but he was asking me about Colin Sexton and what I felt about him and the potential of him potentially being on the Sixers. You know, and what I told him is I like Sexton, but I would question, is Sexton one of those win now moves, or does Sexton need a little bit more development where, like you were saying with Ben Simmons, we're like ready to go now. You need a point guard or somebody to step in that's ready to go right now. And maybe some people believe Sexton's ready to do that, but I was just saying he's a younger guy, so there might be that development side of it still.
No, there is, but I think Sexton, the Cavs are the type of team that actually I think have enough firepower to pull this deal off, and where I'd be happy about it. Like, even as much of a corpse as I think Kevin Love is at this point, like, I could see where he fits in with this squad. Maybe he gets that type of rejuvenation playing with a contender again, the way that Blake Griffin did when he went to Brooklyn. And then in terms of Sexton, like, yeah, I think Colin Sexton's a good player. Like, I would love to have him in Philadelphia. That's a situation where, is it the ideal return I want for Ben Simmons? Probably not, but I would love. I mean, Dreamland, I'd love to get Garland, too. I just think Garland's untouchable. I think Garland would be an absolute stud for this squad. But I'd be happy with Sexton, and they have other young players, too. Like, they have Okoro, they have Chetty Osman. Like, obviously, Kevin Porter Jr. is no good just because of the same position. Not that I think they would move him anyway after just taking him with 3 this year. But I don't know. It's tough for me. Kevin Porter Jr. What am I talking about? Evan Mobley. Sorry, I'm blanking there for a second. I don't know why I'm talking about. I'm thinking about the Houston rumors there for a second. They're not going to trade Evan Mobley after they just took him with 3.
Yeah.
It's tough for me. Like, they have other young. But they have enough young players there where I think it's actually a plausible location. I don't know that they're the favorite necessarily for it to happen, but could Cleveland swoop in and make a Ben Simmons deal? Yeah, absolutely. I think they could.
Sure. And like you were saying with Mobley and Garland, that does give them that leniency to maybe consider moving Sexton, right? Because those guys will have similar positions. And
I would absolutely take a swing at Ben Simmons. My bad. Not to cut you off, but like, if I'm Cleveland, it makes complete sense to take a swing at Ben Simmons. Like, that's what I go. That's the type of team that should do something like that, in my opinion.
If they approach the Sixers with a Colin Sexton and maybe a first rounder, that might be intriguing enough to the Sixers to consider. Maybe there's another body involved, or something like you were saying, Kevin Love somehow. I mean, I know that's something they've been trying to figure out for a little bit there, but that would, at least from what I've been seeing, at least give you a decent amount of win now moves while also still not destroying the future. If you're getting a first rounder, and if you're getting a first rounder that's not protected, that can be some good stuff too down the line as well.
Yeah. Well, Cleveland's still not going to be very good, even if they make the Ben Simmons trade. Like, they're not going to be some world title contender right now. So in theory, that should be a lottery pick that'll have plenty of value. I think any deal is going to have some sort of draft element, as much as I would love for it to be all win now people. I mean, the other deals that still make sense to me are Sacramento, but if Halliburton's untouchable, I just don't know how it happens. I don't think the Sixers would do Buddy and Marvin Bagley and a pick. Like, I just don't think they'd move on that. I still think a deal with Portland around CJ McCollum and Covington could really benefit both sides. Like, that's the logical conclusion of this to me, and I don't understand why it's not going to be. Like, if I'm Portland, I don't get why I wouldn't put Ben Simmons next to Damian Lillard and see what I have there. And if I'm the Sixers, like, I think Covington makes up a lot of the defense, and CJ McCollum gives you more offense.
Well, I agree with you. I think for the Sixers side of that really works. Now, I think what you run into a little bit on the Portland side of it is, if you want to run any off-ball stuff with Ben Simmons and Dame, well, you have to start the ball with Ben Simmons. Like, Dame has to be the off-ball guy at that point. Like, Ben can't do that. He's not shooting any of that, stuff that CJ's doing now. So
you don't think he could be a role guy at a 4?
I mean, maybe, yeah, but I just feel like it would limit them a little bit more. Whereas, like, right now, whether it's CJ or Dame bringing the ball up, they might just randomly pull up, from the logo, which Dame does a lot, pull up from 3 if you don't step out on them and shoot it. Whereas if they're coming up and Ben Simmons is bringing the ball up, like, they're like, all right, well, this guy's not shooting anything. So,
yeah, so what? You crash the paint and you leave Dame Lillard open? Like, that's the thing. I think they both can. If Ben Simmons just plays with a motor, and that's really the issue with Ben Simmons, if you can get him to play with a motor and continue attacking, like, I feel like that's going to open up so much more for Dame at this point. The other reason I think is just it's just stale with Portland. This whole roster is stale. We've seen the logical conclusion of this 6 or 7 times. Like, I'm tired of seeing the same movie. I think Ben Simmons could be a franchise-changing swing for Portland. That's not me just trying to get him out in Philly. I really think it makes a ton of sense for Portland to at least try to make him work with Dame Lillard. The upside is off the charts if it works.
Yeah. Well, so I think with Portland, the upside is really good, but there is also a very big downside. Whereas if you stay the same with the team that you have now, the downside is you're probably a lower playoff team and maybe in the playoff bubble, but the upside is you're higher up and you're definitely making the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like if the margin for the team is now is say between a 4th seed and a 6th seed, with Ben Simmons, say maybe it's a 3 or a 2 seed or a 10 seed. You know, it makes it wider on both sides, the potential, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I don't know. I'm way more intrigued by both of these teams now. And obviously the Embiid Dame combo would just be absolutely outrageous. It's just not going to happen. Like, that's the thing. Any of those dreams of Dame or Brad Beal have long sailed. I'm just interested to see which side bites first. I mean, somebody is going to have to do something here sooner than later. Or Ben Simmons is just going to sit out the entire year, which I wouldn't totally rule it out, but that feels, it's one thing for an NBA player with 1 or 2 years left on his contract to just say, yo, I'm not coming back. Doing it with 4 years after you sign a max contract, like, that is a decision.
Well, it is. And I think obviously then if you're doing that as the 76ers team, you run the risk of Embiid being like, man, you guys are going to waste another year of me. And then he's upset. And who knows where that spirals out. I had to guess. I think in the next week or so, maybe a week or two, there is a Cavs deal and it's done.
Yeah. I mean, training camp is near. Like, we're about a weekish away from training camp, so it's going to be sooner than later. We'll see if we're going to see how awkward we're going to get. That's really the theme of it, is how awkward does everybody want to make it and who's going to blink first. All right, who's balling, who's swallowing? Our NBA version of the stock market, we always like to start with the good before the bad. So balling for me this week, I've got Manu Ginobili. He'll be returning to the Spurs as a special advisor to basketball operations. According to Woj, he'll be taking on a player-centric role that is focused on development of players on and off the court.
I love it. Because obviously Ginobili is a huge name, and I think it's really fun to bring the guys back and have them involved with the team. Wasn't Tim Duncan was with them, or is still with them, right? Wasn't he something for a minute?
Tim Duncan was coaching.
Well, yeah, he was coaching. That's right. Was it? But I thought that was the G League, or am I misremembering that?
He was definitely one of Pop's assistants. He was working with the Spurs as well. Yeah,
it was like him and Becky Hammond, right?
Yeah, well, among others. Like, he's obviously got a bigger staff than that, but yeah,
like the three that were kind of talked about. You're right. I do remember that. Yeah, I mean that's super, super exciting and a cool move for the Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, it always felt like that was the logical conclusion here, right? Like, unless Manu Ginobili decided to take a job with like Argentina basketball or something like that, Tim's already back in the fold. He's already back in the fold. It's at what point it's like, just call Tony Parker at that point and everybody's there. So it always felt like that was, kind of I think at first when people saw the Woj bomb, people were more going to be like, wow, is Manu going to come back? Did he take 2 years off? And is he going to come play again? But I think everybody for that split flash of a second had that when they saw Manu Ginobili in a Woj bomb. Just because, at the end of the day, it hasn't been that long. But yeah, it always felt like a logical conclusion there that he would play some sort of role in the Spurs organization. We don't need to rehash how much he means to them, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So my ball-in actually was that. So I pivoted quickly, and it's going to be 3 audio clips that came out this week.
Okay.
2 from Giannis and 1 from Kevin Love. So we'll do Giannis's first, and then we'll jump into Kevin Love's. Giannis's first one was an interview that he was doing and talking about not working out with other NBA players. And his response was, I don't train with other players. I don't want to be buddies with them. If we do this and then go drink coffee with them, I can't go on the court and use my elbows against them.
I mean, it feels like he's kind of been that way for a while. Like Giannis is never really, you never see him in any of the group workouts. Like, you know, for example, like LeBron and KD, for example, work out a ton. We've seen that before, even with Kawhi in the fold with them as well. Like, we'll see a lot of these guys go on these summer runs together. That is the one thing with Giannis is like you don't really see him in a random summer run with anybody.
He doesn't mess like that. You know, he doesn't play like that. So,
Which it's working, so that's good.
yes, Giannis's other quote was, I think it might have actually been a tweet that he said, but no, it wasn't a tweet. It was, he says, I like being a hunter. I'm not the best player in the world. I'm telling you, I'm not. KD, LeBron, Kawhi, Luka, Curry, AD might be, and I'm not. I'm still hunting the all-time greats. LeBron is the best player in the world. So he's saying he's just a hunter out there trying to get those guys.
No, I get that. He's because they have the spotlight on them. Like that's the thing is like not only just with, I mean, it's double whammy in the case of Giannis because you're going to have the target on your back no matter what because you're the defending champ. So you're going to get everybody's best game next year. And then add that to the fact that, yeah, Giannis has a really strong recommendation or really strong chance to be considered the number one player in the world. Like we talked about this, you know, on the episode with Sam B. Albuquerque. Shout out to Sam for coming on again. And you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago as well. He's kind of in that triumvirate. Like I still think KD is one. But if somebody told me Giannis was one, I wouldn't really think it's that ridiculous. I mean, it's those two and Steph Curry. To me, Kawhi is not healthy right now, so I kind of have him in a weird, like, off to the side.
We don't know when he's coming back.
But those three being healthy, like when they're healthy, I think they all have strong arguments to be the best player in the league. Like I understand that Giannis wants to be it's easier to be the hunter than the hunted. Like that's been the thing with LeBron. And what's been so impressive about LeBron for all these years is that, yeah, he's been the best player in the league for a decade and has largely held it. Giannis can't really run from it anymore. It's like, no, you are who you are. Like when you have a game like that in the finals to close it with 50 plus points, when you have multiple MVPs already, when you're an NBA champion, when you've got a defensive player of the year, like, no, you're that dude. There's no running from it anymore. There's no sneaking up on anybody. Like I appreciate the deflection and the humbleness from Giannis, but it's like, no, you're at the top of the mountain now. Everybody's coming for you no matter what. You can try to play cute all you want.
You are on that list now too. You are on that mountain, and people are going to try to climb up there and kick you off of it. So you better be ready for it, essentially. So, last audio clip, or a clip from Kevin Love was actually talking about Colangelo's comments towards him and Team USA. We referenced it at the beginning of the episode. He said he wanted someone to point the finger at for the chance that they lost. It was just wrong in so many ways. For me, sitting up here and being a nice guy right now. But honestly, F that.
Yo, I need that drop. If we had an intern, I'd go pull that drop of me just saying bleep Jerry Colangelo, and that's all I'd say right here because I am always Team Kevin Love in this regard. Y'all know how I feel about the Colangelos. We can keep this episode a family-friendly podcast. I'm completely with our boy Kevin Love. He'll always get ball in there in that case for me.
Yes.
So for Fallen, we actually both have the same Fallen this week as well. It's in the aftermath of the Athletic profile. It's more of David Griffin, I'd say, at this point in New Orleans, essentially saying that, you know, basically the main point of the article in the Athletic was that the profile or that the target was on his back, that he hasn't really made any meaningful strides since taking over New Orleans. They've been pretty disappointing overall. And now, you know, it hasn't worked well with Zion so far. There are already the initial cracks that have started to form in the foundation. Obviously, Zion is the key to everything that this franchise is going to be doing here over the next couple of years. So, you know, I don't want to be one of these people who pushes Zion out the door. I feel like there's kind of been that for a little bit now. I think there's always, you know, we saw it for a little bit in AD too with New Orleans, where it's like, listen, I want this team to be successful. I want this team to go far. Like I want them to have a run of success they haven't had really before in quite a while. But yeah, I mean, I would be ignorant and I would be lying to say that there's definitely not a target on this organization's back. And I would understand why I'm frustrated if I'm Zion Williamson a little bit this year. Like, you know, he's on his third coach now. Like Stan Van Gundy didn't work out. Before that, it just they're going nowhere fast. This franchise hasn't made any improvements despite the AD trade. Drafting Zion at number one, like they have definitively talented players in Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram, but the rest of it hasn't really clicked there. And that's the problem, is like, you do run the risk of losing your superstars if they can't compete at some point, and they haven't taken that next step into the playoffs. That's something that, yeah, I agree with the profile in the sense that David Griffin has to get this right. They had to nail this coaching hire. They have to get these, these moves made. They have to compete here sooner than later, or you are on Zion watch officially. I don't want the Pelicans to be there, but I'd be lying if I said, as you start to read the room a little bit, that it's going to form if they don't start to compete sooner than later.
Yes, and to that article that you're talking about, another one had come out. Christian Clark of NOLA.com published a story that essentially was all about things Williams was getting increasingly frustrated with. And it all started at the very beginning with all the hoops they required him to essentially go through to return officially full 100% from the knee injury that he had in the preseason. He was frustrated because I think it said in the article that it was supposed to only last 8 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks. And it ended up being more than 3 months that he was working to get back on the floor. And, he had those limits, playing limits that he was on. And so, that caused some tension between him and the coaching staff. And so it just has kind of grown from there. And obviously Zion doesn't help anything when he mentioned about playing at Madison Square Garden and starts the rumors all up again.
Yeah.
And he's going to the Knicks. And maybe he does, maybe he does. But at this point, this is like the third report we've seen now. And it first started with being like a family member close to Zion has voiced displeasure, right? And now it's at the point where it's like, no, they're saying, no, Williams is pissed. Like, he's annoyed. You got to put something around him. Again, I think there is a level of like, dude, you haven't been in the league that long. Give them time. But I think that's why it's like, let's wait to see where it gets to,
No, yeah. And I mean, and that's the thing. Like I said, that Willie Green hire, that's why it's crucial, because you can say they haven't gave you time, but it's like their last 3 seasons, the most games they won is 33. Mm-hmm. They brought Zion in. It's been 3 years. This is now his third coach, essentially. They fired Alvin Gentry. They fired Stan Van. They got to start getting it right. It's been a while. I mean, really, if you just look at the last decade of basketball, they won 45 games in 2014 and 2015, and they lost in the first round. That was the year they got swept, I believe, with AD. And then they got to the conference in 2017, 2018. They won a series and lost in the second round. That was the last season before Anthony Davis got traded. Listen, the franchise has got to turn around. They've got a true bona fide superstar, definitive level talent in Zion Williamson. They got to start figuring it out sooner than later. This is what happens. If you don't figure it out the way Milwaukee did, you run the risk.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And so, it sucks, but if you're a smaller market team and you claim nobody wants to come play for you, which is a lot of times what ends up happening, well, then prove it to the guys that are homegrown and show that you'll work around and get things going with them as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's not fair. Like, the reality is that the smaller markets always will have that shorter leash, but we just know what the situation is at this point. Small markets can obviously also just draft well, and there are ways to go around that. So switching over now to Minnesota, Gersson Rosas was fired this week. He's the president of basketball operations, their GM. He's being replaced with Sachin Gupta, who is the Timberwolves executive vice president of basketball operations. Mark Lore and A-Rod have bought this team, so you kind of wondered if there were going to be moves anyway. And that was kind of my initial read, but it's like, hey, that's kind of weird timing as we get close to training camp. What's going on here? Now reports have come out that he was having an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. That will obviously get you fired. We don't really have much else to say in terms of that front. I guess this kind of goes back to the Ben Simmons thing, though, in a way, because the Timberwolves have made themselves a suitor for Ben Simmons. Do you think this makes it more likely, like, not to be a homer, but like, do you think maybe it makes it more likely that one of D'Lo or Anthony Edwards actually gets traded? I don't think it's going to be Edwards. I think it would be D'Lo. But I mean, D'Lo was it seemed like he was untouchable. And I don't know, Gupta's been in the organization, but that is a situation where they could very well trade.
Yeah. My first few thoughts with this was damn, they're doing it again. Like what did Karl Anthony Towns hasn't had stability in his front office, his coaching staff, his team since he got there. It feels like,
Yeah.
the dude has been through so many people. And so I'm sure he's getting frustrated with that because there is like a change in regime. There's that, it all goes around, which is totally fine. But, that could potentially mean these guys want to come in and make a splash right off the rip and maybe make Karl Anthony Towns feel like they're out there to help him and get the players around him that he wants. And if he wants Ben Simmons, then maybe they do go do something like that. But we've talked about like him and D'Lo are close. So maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It just seems like so much turnover for the Timberwolves.
Well, it is. It's constant turnover. I mean, they had, obviously, again, this is a unique type of situation, but, he had hired Saunders, and then he hired, after Thibodeau, he had hired Ryan Saunders, and then he fired him, and then they hired Chris Finch, which was obviously a controversial move at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the whole David Vanderpool saga. And because, that was crazy. It was in the middle of the season. Like, you never see an assistant hired off Toronto's bench in the middle of the season. That was, definitely it's something unique. Now, he also was the one that made the D'Lo trade, though. That's the thing. And so where it's like they haven't, like you mentioned, the injuries, they haven't played a big sample size of games together. Because he made the trade, it's hard for him to kind of bail on that right away. Like you said, when the sample size wasn't there, you wonder now, again, what Gupta decides to do. I still don't think it trades anything on the Ben Simmons front. I think maybe those three guys seem untouchable.
Yeah.
But more importantly, all seriousness aside, Sanjay Gupta invented the NBA trade machine. I forgot about that until I was reading that in his bio that he was the inventor of the NBA trade machine. So I really enjoyed that the inventor of the NBA trade machine is now the GM of an actual NBA team.
I wonder if he's going to run through some scenarios through the trade machine and see if they'll work before he proposes them.
That's what I'm saying. You see him on ESPN just running Ben Simmons deals 24/7.
Just like moving things around. I mean, here's the thing, man. Like at the end of the day, I think the team in general just needs some consistency. And I think that's the overall theme of this. Like, they just need to be consistent with what they pick and not be so reactionary. If you have a bad year or two, figure it out or stick it out, like see it through. Not having a pick, I think it was this year, not having a pick this year was a little rough, a first round pick. For a team that didn't do well, you know what I mean? Like that's a lot of people like what's going on. And so that does seem like there were some mismanaged moments and stuff like that, which probably were other things that were also talked about, but obviously not the main reason that he was let go. But, at the end of the day, it's just like, you got to put people around Towns. You got to have a team that can get some chemistry together and maybe figure something out for a team that's roster on paper should be doing better.
Yeah, I mean, they've had Karl Anthony Towns since 2015.
I know.
The most they won was 47 games in that time. They made one playoff appearance. That was with Jimmy Butler. They lost in the first round. That was to Utah, I believe. They won 36 games the following. They won 19 the following, and then they won 23 after that. They've had a ton of coaches. Like you said, they're in that Pelican situation where you have talented players.
10 head coaches.
Yeah. It's just the turnover is crazy. And they've had a couple draft picks. That's the other thing. It's been the draft picks too, obviously. I think that goes without saying. Even recently, the big Rosas pick that missed was Jared Culver.
Mm-hmm.
Jared Culver, he just didn't really end up to the point where he got traded. He's not even on the roster anymore. They traded him for Dario Saric.
Yeah.
They took him 6 overall. That just didn't really pan out the way you wanted it to. Josh Okogie was a decent pick a couple years ago in 2018. But yeah, this is a situation where the Wolves have got to start getting it right. They've got talented players there. They've got to fill out the rosters. They've got to have a good coach. And you hope that Gupta ushers in a new era of basketball in Minnesota because it just hasn't really been that successful. Like, the bad franchises stay bad for a reason, and you hope finally, for their sake, that they can turn the corner a little bit because they are just in desperate need of it. No way around that.
And I mean, after talking about the Zion Williamson thing, it's like, man, Cat hasn't asked to be like, get me out of here.
No, yeah, you sign the contracts. Like, that's why it's tough. Is like, because early on in your rookie extensions, you can make so much money. So
Yeah.
it's like, how much do you want to be out versus I can make generationally changing money? Look at, and now with the new TV deal that's rumored to be going around, I mean, we're going to start seeing $350 million contracts left and right.
Yeah.
So there are financial benefits, and that's why it's so rare, and we'll never see guys this quickly just bounce right away. Like it has to go catastrophically wrong, essentially, the way that it has with Ben Simmons, where you'll get guys to leave for a little bit. I mean, say what you want about like Anthony Davis. We could say all that we want about the lack of success. Granted, he had more in New Orleans than Karl Anthony Towns has had in Minnesota so far.
Yeah.
But Anthony Davis played there for a while. He took those contracts. Like, guys are always going to take the money first, then you go and chase potentially. And we'll see if that happens one day with Karl Anthony Towns. But I also think there are reasons to be excited and stay when you haven't played with D'Angelo Russell that long. Anthony Edwards took strides. Like, there are reasons to be excited in Minnesota. They just need to keep them going. Like, that's the thing, is like they need to develop the young core and keep everything going in the right direction and not just have that turnover that we mentioned all the time. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. We appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, Player FM, Amazon Music, Spotify, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and be sure to follow us on YouTube. I believe, actually, let me see if I can find out how many we have real quick. I don't think we had a comment. Well, we did have a comment, but it was from a thing we had. 19.
There we go. All right.
Up to 19. So shout
P
out
subscriber 20.
JIV7 subscribed in the last week, so he is number 19, and we appreciate that. You can find us Drive and Dish NBA podcast on YouTube and get a video version of this podcast, which apparently I was talking to somebody. They said they actually prefer to watch their podcast than listen to them. I didn't understand that literally at all, but I was passionate, so I just said, okay, good. Well, you can find ours, and it's here.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat.
Exactly.